Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, the disheveled edition, I'm going to call today.
Why? Is my hair that bad?
No, your hair is great. You actually got a haircut last week. I was so impressed.
Fancy barber here, and I wish I could remember the name of it. It's in Collingwood, though. It's across from Pizza Hut, which if that isn't selling it, I don't know what is.
I feel like that just really changed the whole vibe of the barber when you phrase it that way.
Yeah.
But your hair
it's across the street. It's on the good side.
Your hair looks great.
Okay.
No, I just feel a little disheveled because, I just looked at my countdown widget that I keep on my phone. That's like the countdown to Leadville.
Yeah.
And
under 30.
No, 32,
oh, okay.
33.
Well, you got lots of time.
Yeah, so we're recording this on July 15th. It's the date for Leadville is August 17th, but we're also in the middle of packing. Peter's heading to Mountain Bike Nationals in Nova Scotia. I'm heading down to New Jersey to see my family, see some of the folks at Bicycling Magazine, introduce DW to his new aunt. My parents got a new dog. I don't really know what the relation is there.
Sure. It's
new best friend. And then when I get back, I keep thinking we have a week before we leave for Leadville, but really you're going to get home from nationals and we're going to have 3 days. So when I say I feel a little disheveled, I just have 18 packing lists in my head. I'm starting to think about Leadville itself, but I'm also stressed to not be there for nationals for you. I'm a little sad that I'm missing that.
Okay. Well, there'll be lots of people there. It's okay.
Yeah. It's just lots going on.
And it's a big week. We had, I didn't actually know this. Usually I think about, there's the Unbound, usually that sort of first weekend of June. And then there's somewhere in the middle of August, it's like the Leadville, Breck Epic.
Mm-hmm.
We usually have a couple local endurance races. Those are so the big ones. But this last week or so has been just tons of racing. There's been World Cups. There's been a couple of gravel. There's a big New York gravel race that went down this weekend. We had a local, the Reggie Ramble happened this weekend, which is one of the big local gravel races. I'm going to forget it. Our first enduro race in Ontario, which that series is really popping up really well. And we're putting a lot of these enduro style trails in, which is really exciting for a number of clients. A couple podiums in that one, which is exciting too. What else am I forgetting for races? There was a couple others.
Well, I was all weekend. My long runs got pushed to the afternoon, to the hottest part of the day. Because
of course, those races, yes.
I was covering Tour de France and the Giro d'Italia women. So a lot of, actual high level road racing going on that, covering, watching. Super fun racing this weekend, actually, for both of those. The Giro d'Italia women, if you didn't watch it, go watch some of the highlights because when I tell you that the final stage was a nail biter and holy moly.
There was a second going into it.
There was a second between 1 and 2 in the GC. And when I tell you that the finish was, I cried.
Now, if someone didn't want to watch, they could read the Molly Herford synopsis on bicycling.com.
You could read the synopsis, but I highly recommend read my synopsis, but go watch just the last 5 minutes of the stage. I don't want to give away everything.
So the synopsis, though, is at Bicycling Magazine, bicycling.com?
Yes, over at bicycling.com. Okay. You can find it on the homepage. And then, honestly, watching Tadej Pogačar this weekend just absolutely school the field in the Pyrenees, in the mountain stages. Both races ended with mountaintop climbs. Holy crap. That's really all you can say about it. Just watching him.
Sure, yeah. People seem excited about the tour this year.
Yeah. Honestly, it's been really fun to watch. And this weekend, I think, was the pivotal weekend. This is where Jonas Vingegaard kind of realized yesterday, this is probably not happening for me.
Okay.
But the attacks that Pogačar threw, just beautiful. You gotta watch.
Okay.
When we talk about, because we talk about this all the time, and whenever we're talking about racing, whether it's trail or mountain bike, we're always saying, if you go around someone, you go around them. You go and then you give it 800% to build that gap. Mm-hmm. And the commentators keep talking about it. That is the thing that Vingegaard cannot answer to. So every time Pogačar just goes around, he doesn't just go around and kind of make a little attack. He goes around and it's just
Right.
but like looking super casual as he does it.
Okay.
So-
well, that's the nature of pro racing, I guess. Yeah, it looks easy.
But that's the thing we always talk about is like make it look easy when you're passing someone, but pass them with everything you have.
Yeah, I mean, there's the basic thing is a lot of times people won't even go around, and that like demoralizes people. But yeah, you don't want to go around and then let the person draft you. Ideally, you would try and get a bit of a gap there for sure. Neat. Okay. And then we had a Canada Cup as well. It's the only one I'm forgetting.
Right.
So some of I'm wearing the Collingwood Collective shirts. So our local racers, some of them were there. Yeah, so that's really exciting. A couple of our masters were there as well, getting ready for nationals as well. So it'll be exciting this coming week with nationals, and then another round of the large Ontario Enduro Series is going as well, which is exciting. So
Yeah. How are you feeling about defending your jersey?
a little nervous, yeah, a little nervous. You never know who's going to show up. That's the dilemma with masters, right? When you're in pro, they say the goal's pretty obvious. You're trying to go to worlds or you're trying to win nationals, and then you sort of know who's going to be there, plus or minus. Someone gets sick or injured, but you sort of know that. So it is weird with masters because it could be just the easiest race ever, or it could a couple of my main rivals might show up. So I haven't really been digging into it. I sort of like the excitement of that at least, right? And then you show up anticipating the best, and then you race whatever you can on the course. So that'll be good, but good visiting. And then, yeah, certainly watching some of the youth going for these big races. I do like masters because we race at 8:30 and then I can
It
just
is
sort
great.
of eat pizza and skateboard the rest of the day, I guess.
Skateboard?
Well, I always wanted to. That was the kids. The whole time I've been racing pro, the many years. This is my 17th year, I think, riding Trek bicycles with Trek Barrie as well. So I should give a shout out to them for all their support. But those 17 years, I've always been, suddenly I was racing at, 1 or 2 p.m. And then I would always lament that the kids had already raced, were slugging a chocolate milk, and then were going to jump their bikes or skateboard or go home and have lunch or whatever they were going to do. The day was theirs. And I just always, it's sort of a weird thing that the thing you love as much, you just want it to be done and go skateboard. But maybe it was skateboarding all along.
That's sort of how I feel about Leadville, but that also reminds me of last year in Nova Scotia. There actually was like a young 12-year-old boy on a skateboard that came up to us as we were walking back to the cabana. It was like, "Can I pet your dog?" And we're like,
Right.
"He's not a nice boy. Sorry."
Yeah.
It's always really sad telling
That
kids.
wasn't the one when the dad laughed at us when we said that he was like a mean boy or something, and then the dad laughed at the size of our small dog.
No, but that
Okay.
happens too.
Okay. So we have a couple of Q&A today. We should go through the thing. We have a question around sort of like looking at your race. You've finished, sort of more of an endurance race, but I think this probably applies to most races that are aerobic. So, reviewing that file or reviewing that race and sort of some takeaways if you're going to go into another race, or maybe you have another, race coming up later in the year, the next race. That's sort of similar. So we'll look at that, some of the things to examine. Molly already talked a little bit about sort of going around people and attacking. So that's great. And then we have another great question around sort of adjusting load. If it was hot on Saturday and I did my intervals, do I have to adjust Sunday because it was hot, or do I adjust that should I have adjusted, or should I adjust that actual workout because it's hot?
Which is a really good question for right this second. I feel like pretty much
very hot.
everyone is in a heat wave. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could probably apply that to altitude. So those are the ones we're covering. We had a couple other notes. We do have a Strava group that we're hoping to do a bit more with as some new features come down the
Which,
pipe.
also thank you for everyone who has joined already. I feel like our numbers have it's not like we're in the millions or anything, but I think we've tripled since we actually put it out there. So
I would
exciting.
say I've sort of returned as we've done this to Strava, using my actual name and so forth. And it's pretty good. It's good to see where people are riding, and the kudos and stuff are sort of nice.
Yeah. And okay, so I'm also working on this piece for bicycling about Strava and safety, because obviously, in the last few years, there has been concerns around privacy and your Strava settings and all of that. And I was just talking to their chief business officer.
You were talking to a bigwig.
Yeah, bigwig. Zip Allen, who's a fantastic human being. She is awesome. She gave one of the best keynotes I've ever heard at Camp Strava, just beautifully addressed. But we were talking about privacy features and stuff, and she was really highlighting a lot of the new ones. And I would really urge people, if you haven't checked your privacy settings lately, they're super easy now to adjust within the app even.
Yeah.
It used to be you had to go to the website and kind of dig around and
There's a couple new ones I saw that. So now it doesn't matter. It used to be you could hide your home area, but it's wherever your start and finish are. It sort of hides within, and you can adjust 10 meters up to 3 kilometers or something. So, if we're away traveling, we were just in Montreal, it sort of hides that as well, which is
you can
nice.
do that. You can hide start times now.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah.
You can just
People don't know you're out training at midnight. That's your secret.
Yeah. You can, avoid being in any flybys or in group activities. It's just, lots of stuff that's really easy to adjust if you just take a second to just check your privacy settings. So, like, highly recommend just check your privacy settings and just make sure that it is what you're comfortable with.
There's a base one there too, just like your followers are the only ones that can see your activity, which is probably makes sense. Not that you can, for sure, but you maybe would only add people you sort of know a little bit or seem like, they are people that other people know or something.
You can even hide your entire map. I didn't realize that. You can basically just use it almost as
I saw that the other day. Someone posted and I was like, come on, I'm in this for the maps. Let me see the map.
I know. I knew that was going to really bother you. But like, if you just want to like post how much you rode, how many miles or kilometers or whatever, you can do that. You don't actually need to have your map.
I sort of like it because sometimes I end up in places I probably shouldn't be. And I need to edit the whole map to, the start location.
Exactly. Now you just hide the map.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Well, it's okay to, I'm not going to say I'm trespassing.
Yeah. Look, it happens to the best of us.
Whatever your reasons are.
Whatever your
reasons. Let's not discuss those.
Anyway, we'll include the link to our Consummate Athlete Strava in the show notes. And definitely going to have some cool stuff coming like within the Strava community there. So join, hang out.
Cool. And then I wanted to make sure that we point out again, you have your new book out with Misha Powell, Sprinting Through Setbacks. So we'll put that link in the show notes. But it's actually, there's a lot of Google content there. So if you want to just use Molly Hurford Sprinting Through Setbacks, you can find lots of articles about it and different things.
It's been going really well. People seem to be super into it, which is always very exciting as a co-author in this case.
Yes. And then you have a contest, which I really like. And this contest is you read 3 books and you do 3 sports and you submit this in some way. I'm sure the details are on Instagram or on the website. And so is this open? This is more for youth.
Yeah. So if you have any young people and you're trying to get them to do some summer reading or some summer moving, if that's more of the issue, Strong Girl Publishing has our summer reading challenge. So it's, read 3 books, do 3 sports. And then we just have on stronggirlpublishing.com, there's a form you can fill out, and everyone who fills it out gets stickers and some fun stuff. And there's going to be some big prizes, and that's running through Labor Day, so you have plenty of time.
All summer.
So get that summer reading.
If I'm a master's man, can I get some stickers?
You can.
Okay.
You absolutely can. I mean, I would prefer it if you then give the stickers to like a young girl who's out in the neighborhood doing some cool stuff on her bike. But whatever. If you want to rock a Strong Girl Publishing sticker on your helmet.
If I'm the guy riding my TT bike and my gravel bike, and
I would love it.
Counting them as different sports. Like, come on, that wasn't the idea.
Not the point.
Okay, so there you go. So youth, I think that's a great summer motivation for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into reviewing the race file. So what to take away from your race and how to comment.
And we're going to say race file, but like, just even if you didn't have a file, like I think you could do this, off of how the race went and maybe the lap time. So don't like but the race file, we're reviewing your race file.
Yeah. I also wanted to add, this is not that you review it during the race or pay attention to it.
So if there's any assessment during, which is like, sometimes I could do this like based off of emails I get, or we have our AMA, we do our meetup once a month with coaching clients where we look at the heat question came from that, for example. So this is just sort of something common. Molly's on a great thought here that like, during the race, you're like, okay, I started too hard, or I didn't eat enough carbs at dinner last night, or I should have done 5 minutes instead of 6 minutes. Like you got to get back focused to, what you can do in the moment for sure.
Like, obviously this is a lot easier to like, you don't really think during, say, like a cross-country mountain bike race that's, 75 minutes. You're pretty just on the limit the whole time. But definitely the longer the race gets, I think the more potential there is to really start doing a lot of assessing and a lot of like freaking out. Actually, on our site, I just did a post about reframing race goals midway through the race and sort of a few questions to go through when you start getting into that like mental state of like, oh geez.
Sure.
If you do hit that moment.
And so that would be like a first thing. Again, we don't even need the file. And this is, as a coach, this is where the comments, I often say, your Training Peaks is what we use. So the comments, but you could do this in your workout journal or wherever you're journaling about your race, which you should reflect on the race, or else you'll make the same mistakes. And you may still just make the same mistakes forever anyhow. But the idea is like, did your mind wander? Were you able to focus, refocus? that would be, what were you thinking about? And then maybe there's something there, like, ways that you could try and prevent that in the future. I used to write like a back burner of like tasks to remember so that like my mind hopefully wouldn't go to that during the race. But you are right. It is interesting that in the 100 miler, the pace is, and the focus level is not nearly as high as like a cyclocross race or something, right? But you may find in a cyclocross race, if you get blown off the back and you're in no man's land and you sort of shut it down, that your mind starts going to a pity party, rather than trying to, learn something else, or, get your fastest time, or, the percentage off the winner. There's still a race to be salvaged there, but you can see how, like, even in a 1 hour or 40-minute race, you could certainly get the intensity dropped and end up in your head.
Exactly. So just wanted to give that caveat before we got into actually looking at the files. And this is why we always talk about, like, maybe it's even, put your screen on just like the map, or
yeah,
even
we've talked about that a lot. Like,
cover the
what are you
screen with
looking at?
tape,
And
like,
people say, oh, I need to look at heart rate. And it's that, and like autopause. It's, I don't ever criticize someone for, coming. I appreciate any comments we get and pushback. Sometimes there are some good ideas there, but it's like, no, I need to look at heart rate, or else I won't know that I'm going hard enough. And it's like, well, no, that's pretty obvious. And if you're staring at your device, you probably aren't going as hard as you could, because you're not looking at where you're going, right? There's sort of this idea. So it's not that we don't think you ever would look at heart rate or ever look at power in a race, but a lot of times you don't need that. And so you might just do, like you say, a navigation screen in an endurance race, or it might be laps I've seen people use, or just a meaningless screen, right? So you don't get information that's helpful at all, or distracting.
Yeah. I mean, geez, I remember like 10 years ago, most pros would put electric tape over their Garmin screens.
Or not even like have it in their pocket. Zipped up. Yeah. Or like I remember even in the Tour, there would be people with them like under their seat or something too. And then it was always this, there was a push there for a while, and I think it's still around, where like the heart rate monitor would actually have like a recording function within it, and there are still a few of those on the market. But I thought that was a pretty good idea, because a lot of times it doesn't really matter. Probably a couple times a week it shouldn't matter, or it's like so obvious, right? Like, go for an easy run, and then when you get back, we can assess whether it was easy, and then triangulate that for the next workout. That's a great thing to do. And sometimes I laugh, it's like 5 by 30 seconds hard during your otherwise easy run or bike. Again, we don't really need it, just go, right? And maybe you need a timer to execute that, so that, like, your Timex watch or something, right? But
yeah, although even then I will argue, like, I'm not gonna lie, when I do the like 6 30-second things, like, I'm not always checking my watch for exactly 30 seconds. Like, at this point, I know about what 30 seconds is.
You might even, if you have a predictable route, you might even know, from here to here is about that far.
Yeah.
And I do like that. Sometimes it is, when we're thinking about racing, a lot of times it is go from here to the top of the hill, or from here to the finish line. So sometimes it is good to just roughly estimate.
What is that, the fartlek?
Yeah,
that's pretty much what that is.
The old hydro or electric
poles.
The posts. Hydro isn't a thing the rest of the world.
No.
It's a very Canadian, Ontario thing. So anyhow, the race file. So the expectations we've been sort of talking about, and we'll do a bit more on that, but let's get right into sort of like this heart rate or power tracing. And so we'll think heart rate to start. And so a lot of times what we'll see in any race is it's very hard to start. Right? We're starting to see that more in running too, where it's a little more like jostling for position, see how much you can hurt other people off the start, and then everyone settles into their pace usually. And so that's okay. That's sort of like the game, and we want to prepare for that to be able to absorb that. But there is a point where we have a post called putting your hand in the fire, or something to that effect. And it's sort of like, how when you're doing marshmallows, you can like brown the marshmallow, but at some point it lights on fire, and it's not really, some people like that type of marshmallow, but not everyone, right? Most people like the browned marshmallow, and that's sort of what you want. So that's similar with pacing, or like when we do a hard start, there is there's a point of no return where you will blow up, and your body will say, like, you need to lay down on the side of the trail, or like really back off. Or what we'll see in an endurance race usually is, the first 1, 5, 20 minutes are the best you've done in a long time. This could be heart rate or power. And then the logical thing would be that you sort of have to slow down from that, right? If you did a 5-minute or 20-minute test and you peaked at your heart rate, you would assume you're going to have to come down from that. But the thing with a race, you don't recover and roll back down the hill and then maybe do another one. You have to keep going to some degree. So then what you'll see is sort of like a slow fade. So if you looked at your heart rate or your power tracing, so the first hour might be up around your threshold, and then maybe it would drop down to sort of zone 3 tempo. These words don't matter. It's slowly decreasing to the right, as time goes on, eventually usually coming back into sort of like your endurance range where we can sort of do that for a long time, right? What we would probably want this is like a 3, 4, 5, 6 hour race, more moderate, where it's a little steadier. And what you might see is what we call, the smiley concept, this like sort of double peak, or there's a couple different ways you describe that. But basically harder start, so it's a little higher on the left. And then soon you settle into your pace, moderate pace for the duration. And then once you can sort of see the finish line, you start emptying the tank so it tips up at the end again. And that could be heart rate or power. Heart rate's often less pronounced than power, but that would be the idea, right? Where if you picture a very slight smiley face where it's like a hard start, you get into your position, and then you ride your pace for the rest of the race. You fuel really well, and then you accelerate towards the finish. And that might be a finish line sprint. It might be a 10K out. You're just on the limit, really breathing hard to finish. And that could happen in any type of race. Right? But that's where we start going, you could say anaerobic, you're on the limit, you're cross-eyed. So that's sort of the idea. So when you're looking at your files, it's sort of, what does it look like? Was it very steady? Was it a smiley? Or was it sort of like a slow death to the right? And usually what you'll see is the first two options, the steady eddy or the smiley, those are usually decent results for you. Whereas the slow death, often, if you end up in your endurance zone in a race, right, then it's generally it didn't go as well. It was probably pretty miserable, right? Yeah. So that would be, just basics of looking at that file analysis. And then what we would do is, okay, say you're the slow death person and you did fade and it wasn't super enjoyable. Then we would say, okay, well, was there a point where you could have backed off and got on your pace? And it might be riding alone sooner, right? You might have to give a group up, and that's normal, right? Again, getting back to expectations, most off-road races, there's periods where you're going to be alone, if not most of the race. If you look at Unbound or something, this year we had the Unbound women's finish with 11 wide to start, but that's often not the case. It's usually like a couple people maybe, and a lot of people are alone or like bouncing between groups, accordion, where it gets technical or hilly, but there's a lot of time alone. So just that expectation that you are in in the same way that Ironman is alone, a lot of these endurance things are sort of like solo missions. And if you're good at drafting and technical, you often can like cheat your way through a bit and get some help.
To be fair, in Ironman, that actually is cheating.
It is cheating in Ironman. Yeah. But I don't think, if you took that rule away, the people who are pretty good at drafting and whatnot would probably start clustering like that. But often you end up alone, right? Like, this is the nature. And again, most of us are not the elite riders where we're very skilled at riding in the group and willing to put in those surges to do it. We don't have those surges a lot of times. So sometimes it works out and you're in a group and that's great and we really want to enjoy that. But we also don't want to, when we're alone, it's boom, I've been training for this. This is why I've been doing all those big solo rides and solo tempos and all this stuff. And then if the question is, or if the actual response is, I've never ridden alone in my life and it's terrifying, then, there might be something there as well that we can work on. That's more appropriate to the race. So that was the other thought I had there. And then of course, with that slow death, there's the pacing. So it was your best 5, your best 20, your best 1, your best sprint, and then it went downhill from there. The other question would be, if you fueled better, would it have at least mitigated that, right? Would it have been really hard and then at least like sort of moderate the rest of the race if you could settle in and keep fueling? But a lot of times we do our best hour, best 2 hours to start the race and we forget to eat because we're in the group. We had to stay in the group. Right? But then we don't eat for 2 hours. So we've just blown through all our fuel on board and you feel very poor from that point on.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about this a billion times. It is the tricky thing with bike racing where if you want to have a good race, you do have to go hard in the start to stay in the group. Like that's part of the game. Yep. You could just casually start at your like preferred pace. Yeah. Sure, by all means. But you're going to lose the draft advantage and like you have no chance of, having a good result in the race.
Sure. I think that's where people always want to know the exact time. I don't know what the exact time is, but there's the initial start off the line. You can afford a little bit of surging there, but at some point you do need to settle in. And I think it's when you start seeing, this is where I think heart rate is actually helpful, irregardless of where we are. It's going to be saying this is the load on your body. So again, if you start seeing up into the, over 85, over 90%, and it's like that for minutes, then, you know, the time is burning, right? Like think about what doing intervals like that, where, okay, I'm riding at 90%. How long do I expect to ride at 90% of my max heart rate or at my threshold, right? Go ahead and do an interval like that and then say, okay, oh, that's really hard, about 5 minutes in even, that's like really hard. At a race, the thing is we're super amped up. We're probably recovered. We're probably fueled ourselves really well. We've put so much money and time into this. There's lots of people around us. Our family's watching. So of course, for the first 5 or 20 minutes, you feel like you're on fire and it didn't feel that hard, right? That's the tricky thing. And that's my argument for why I think heart rate is good, is that heart rate doesn't really care. It's just telling you the load on your system. Whereas your brain is going to be modified by a lot of this other stuff. So sometimes we do need this external thing that's going to be like, are you sure? Are you sure? So I would say around, 5 minutes into, say, like a 5-hour race or a longer race even, you do want to start a gut check. And if you're breathing really hard, like this is a cyclocross race or a 20-minute time trial or a 5-minute time trial, it's okay, right? Like settle in. I would say that's where you need to be bold in an endurance race and start saving those matches.
I was actually going to use the match thing. Like I literally think of it as like having a matchbook, and like in my brain, I actually am saying like, okay, burned that match, burned that match,
Right.
burned that match. Like, and at the beginning of a race, I feel like 3 matches is like your ideal burn.
Well, this gets into defining.
This is very
matches.
specific.
So in data, like in WKO, which is the Training Peaks data analysis software, they do have different things where it's like counting the matches and how many, trying to quantify the match.
Like it's more of a gut check. Like I feel like I have 3 matches to burn at the beginning, and after that, like you
Well,
gotta
I mean,
chill.
I think you could logic it out, right? Like think about workouts that you've done in your life, right? Like do you do your like a 20-minute time trial and then do another one? Like rarely do you do that, so that would be at least one, right? But you might do 5 by 5 minutes, that's pretty hard, around that type of pace. So if it's 5 minutes around that pace to start, and then you settle in, that you should be able to recover down from that eventually. But if you've ever seen a lot of peaks in races, this is always where I'm like, I feel like training wise, we could have done a better job, because in theory in training, you should be able to do, 1 5-minute time trial faster, than we could in a race where you're going to ride for 5 hours or something, right? So this is sometimes a good indicator too, is just when we're looking at the file, are these a lot of peaks, especially on those short duration things, or short duration powers, where you might find that, oh, okay, I can probably train harder, right? I should really get to some hills sometimes, or get into a thing. The exception would be certainly you get into like a sprint against someone with people watching with money on the line. I would hope that you are able to muster a pretty good sprint in that standpoint and get like a 5, 10, 15, 20. That wouldn't be a horrible thing. But again, you might not expect that at the end of a race, when in a sprint training workout, you would be more fresh and warmed up.
Right.
But sometimes the money on the line with someone sprinting you is that's when you let it go. But something like a 5 minute, a 10 minute, a 20 minute, you probably can do that in training.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're looking at this race file, you're reviewing your race, like what are sort of maybe just give us a few like bullet points that you're making notes on, or like that the person should be like,
Yeah,
oh, okay, this. And we talked about the curve as far as your heart
the
rate
tracing,
goes.
like the trend, right? Like what does the file look like? And then you always want to cross-reference. There are situations where someone might have like a really high heart rate to start and then it settles in, but usually it would settle in and even tip up a bit at the end. And what that can be is like someone who's like really gets amped up, or not even nervous. Like they could be a great racer. It's just like they're so activated that the heart rate's high because they're like, wow, like vibrating, right?
That would be me.
I don't know you. It'd be interesting, right? So you might see, okay, Molly's at 130 beats before the race even starts. She goes off the line.
I'm at 130 beats right now thinking about it.
and then you're running at 160 beats, but then once the race settles in, this is thinking about your 50 milers, you settle in where we would more expect like endurance, whatever that would be, 140s or 150s, and then you are very steady the whole race, and then maybe there's a bit of a sprint towards the finish where you hit 170 or something, whatever. So you wouldn't say, oh, Molly, you like went out too hard, because like you didn't, because assuming your splits and the race performance were okay, then that's not irregular. So you do see that where there's a bit of extra activation. It's not that common where like the heart rates, you could say maybe the heart rate was lying a bit to start. But you do see that. So that would be one thing. But I think that tracing would be like a big, just general concept, which then you could cross-reference to things like lap times, paces as relevant with the terrain, of course. Power, again, we can look for the peaks, like were there peaks in the race? Were those expected? Does that inform our training? what else would we look for? If you knew the story of the race, so where did you come off? This is often the thing, like, are you behind immediately? And not everyone is, we're not talking about the start of the race, but this might be in your age group or something like that, right?
This is why these comments, like post-race, taking the minute to even look at the file and add comments to it really matter, because the file doesn't
tell the whole story. No, again, you could completely misinterpret it, right? Someone might even have the, the death march thing and come out onto the top of the race, right? You don't know.
Well, because they were, like, for example, because they were, doing what they could to stay in that group.
And it was just one of these like attrition races where everyone just fell apart or something. Who knows, right? And maybe it got really technical at the end. Sometimes you'll see that where, all the hills are earlier and all the moves are earlier, and then it's just sort of slow, clunky technical stuff, or the weather could change. You see that again, and that's where heart rate can drop a bunch. It starts snowing or something.
Well, even yesterday doing my run it was like really hot to start, super humid, and then suddenly it rained, and I would tell you, if I had heart rate on, like, my file would have looked completely weird, because suddenly, cooled off in the rain, getting like just this nice, like, cool breeze.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then, the tactics come in too, where you might be sitting with a group. And then this is where, again, you can sometimes pull out some of this in a file, but it would be really nice that the athletes, like, I was with a group with 20K to go and I tried to make a move and then they pulled me back. I got back in the group, but I was really, really hurting. And then, with 10K to go, there was another little popper and I came off. So then it's sort of, that might be something that, again, in training, you might start trying to simulate, either by riding a little longer or thinking, okay, well, what was that move they did? Okay, they couldn't do, they were at 500 watts and they got dropped. Okay, well, let's try and do intervals around there or something like that. So you could start getting a little more like designing your training off of like, where was that critical moment? Or where did you, fail is a strong word, but like, where did you lose the group? So for some people, it actually is just initially you're not with the group. So our first goal might be to get you into the group and then see how long you can stay in the group. Because a lot of times, if it's just that 30 seconds standing up the first little climb, and then you would be in the group and it's sort of going downhill for a little while and you can draft and it's flat for 20K, you might be in the group for 20K. Right. And that might be fine, right? All for standing up and going hard for 30 seconds. So that's where you sort of want to know where someone is, because you need to be in that group in some cases, right? If that's the group you need to be in. Yeah. So that's that.
So sort of how the race played out as we're looking at the file. And then I think the other thing you have a note here is the food and drink element of it. So if you can take, when this is still fresh in your mind, like, how much were you eating and drinking? Like, did you stop and refill? Like, were you going through the one bottle? Did you have an hour where it was super technical and you couldn't reach your bottle, so you didn't take any drinks?
Yeah.
Did you have a pinprick in your bottle at 10 miles in and realize that you no longer had any water in your pack?
One of our clients, who's a very smart racer, he said short arms, deep pockets or something like that. And he had like a ton of food in his pockets. And I'm still not 100% sure if it was like literal or figurative.
That is the best, that's the best like metaphorical or like Zen kind of like.
So I think when you're in that, and I get into the scenario a lot, I'm second a lot. There was a move, I couldn't go with it. It really is the move beyond what I could do fresh. So then you get into, could you have eaten more? Or were you like at the limit of what you can, were you vomiting or were you bonking? And this sounds a lot more like you were, on the, running out of fuel, bonking, blowing, whatever you want to describe it as. So this might be, can we get more fuel in earlier? And then you're hinting at the, like, is there mix in the bottle, which is more common, it seems like now, to get these higher loads in. Is it more gels, but can you get the gel out of your pockets? Or was it really stressful because you were in a group with people and you couldn't get the food out? Did you try and use natural foods or bars and then realize that, when you're racing, no one really does this too much? Maybe in a long race, you pull out the odd bar when things chill out. But there is the, like, you need to pull this out of your pocket while you're moving. And it's funny, I was riding.
The rice just disintegrates.
Yeah, the food doesn't work. You choke on it. It's in your nose now.
Oh my God. Have you ever gotten a grain of rice from that in your nose?
Horrible.
It is disgusting.
Yeah, with the rice bars. So it is like you want to think about that, but there's also the skill of getting it out. And I'll do this in assessments, in skill sessions is, can you ride around in a circle with one hand? Right? So we'll set up a little cone and you ride around with one hand. Most people have a lot of trouble with that, especially if it's both hands in both directions, right? Like and there's sort of 4 options there. Very, very tricky. be careful. Don't flip over your handlebars and grab your front brake or whatever. But this is the idea, right? Is you're going to have to do this potentially in the middle of a 20-person group.
Yeah.
Grab your race bar, unwrap it, put on your raincoat. So there's a lot of stuff there where if you don't do it, you have an option of going out the back and getting dropped while you're eating your race bar, or not eating and then slowly, you're not going to be there. So it is practicing these things in the real world, but also some of these drills, like riding around in a circle. Like I was just riding with 2 young athletes yesterday, and we were passing a cone as they rode around the circle with one hand and playing with how tight the circle could be. And you ease into that, but that's I guess the idea, right? Is with this fueling and stuff is where is the food and how's it coming in? When is it coming in? And then at the end of the race, when we're doing this race analysis, did it work? And then if the answer is I was closer to bonking than vomiting, then I think it's probably trying to get more food in earlier. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Anything else with reviewing a race file?
Yeah, the expectations I find, and that's a big concept, but
go back to 3 weeks ago when we talked about the expectations versus reality.
Yeah, so they say that's like happiness, right? So, the reality versus, expectations minus reality equals happiness, something to that effect. And so it is that framing of a lot of times you do pretty well at the end of it all. So we talked about not judging the race, not already deciding if this is a good or bad race before you cross the line. Because sometimes, a lot of the times, you're not that far off. You're actually on the podium. I always come back to, you started the race, hopefully not injured, hopefully not sick, and you got there on time with a working bike. That's always goal number one. Is super hard for adults and very worthwhile to make that goal number one.
For sure.
Because you're going to miss it a bunch. One of those things won't be true. Second one, finishing the race. Most of these endurance races, it's very good. You're going to have adversity, whether it's your gut, whether you crash off the course, more technical, the hurricane, or not hurricane, I shouldn't say that, but like a storm blows in and it's just quite adverse conditions, a flat. So there's so many things that you make it to the finish line. And sometimes what an adventure, what a goal, what a worthwhile thing that you persevered and got yourself out of the forest. I think that's why we should be doing a lot of this stuff. Is there was a challenging event, a course, and we got through it, whatever happened. And then third goal would be, those placing things, which whatever your winning is, and we can have those scaled out, ABC goals. Mm-hmm.
Seagulls.
Get our shirt on Consummate Athlete Shop, the ABC goals. So yeah, I think that's the idea, is just sort of working through those goals and being proud of that. And the expectations being that like some of this stuff is very, very hard to do it. You don't win a lot of the races. There's very few people who are of this like dominant status, right? Like certainly even the ones that people would usually list have not won anything in the Tour this year, right?
For sure.
You're multi, all 3 of them, the Wouts, Pitcocks,
Pout Van Aert, still hilarious. Shout out to whoever said that first.
Yeah. So, there might be a window where you're the winning person, but that it ebbs and flows.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny how your expectations, or like how you think the race went, is so tightly related to this really arbitrary thing of where you finished in the pack, because like you can't control the people around you. Mm-hmm. So I realized this last weekend at Summit 700 when I crossed the line and they announced that I was the second woman. And I went from like being like, oh, this was an amazing race. Like I'm feeling really good. Things are going well. Leadville's going to be great. To like, I suck.
Yeah.
I can't believe I did that. Like, what a dumb, like, you're so bad at racing.
And
What's
that's the
wrong
frame.
with you?
That's what I'm saying. Like, you were there. You experienced the whole thing. You were confident in the effort. You came in with a frame, if you can picture a frame, of like, I won and everything was perfect and I am so fit. And then someone said, oh, but I think you were actually second. And so that frame just shifted over a little bit. And now it's the whole world sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And maybe it would be disappointing if you didn't win. And okay, maybe you should have paid more attention that there was like another woman who went off the line or something, if that was the case. It
so
was
side note, that was not the case. I did win.
Someone, they cut the course or whatever. But it's interesting that like you should have been very confident.
But it was wild. Yeah, it was wild how quickly my brain just plunged into like, you suck territory. And then like I talked to myself even before I was like positive that I had won, like even like 10 minutes later, I was like, okay, if I was second and a woman actually was that far ahead of me, Like, good for her.
And
I
maybe
don't-
she was like, that was her A race. And
Yeah.
like, there's a million scenarios. She's a professional half marathon racer.
I was like, I don't do the half marathon.
So there's lots of, and that was not your main goal, but then also just, isn't that great that there's people to race, right? Because it's also horrible when there's no one to race and you win every race. That's how you end up
Exactly.
not really enjoying racing and being, nervous and activated about it. So
Yeah, so like I talked myself around it, but like, yeah, holy crap. Like I was so shocked at the like just such a fast shift from like feeling good to just feeling like absolute crap. And it was just such a weird moment of time realizing like how attached I was to that.
And this is, that's at the end of the race. So that's a gut punch, but at least you didn't have to like adjust or like, there's nothing you could do at that point. So there's also the, you go off the line, you thought you were going to be whatever position, but you realize, oh, I'm blown at the back of this group, for whatever reason. In a mass start race, it's because there's pro tour guys driving the pace and something about the course made it that it had to be a hard start. And it's like, oh, you got blown at the back because you suck. And it's like, no, it's not because you suck. It's because there's pro tour guys driving, and that's just the nature of the tactics. And it's a little more solo to start this one, versus maybe in the previous years it was just a chiller start because it was really hot out, or the course was really boring for the first 10K, right? And that can change the dynamics. If there's not like a pinch point initially, then usually people aren't so keen and they just sort of roll out. So this is again expectations during the race of. You need to always come back to, okay, like I'm trying to get to the finish line. That was the second goal. I started, now I'm trying to get to the finish line. And what's important for that? And work with those other goals as they become available in the race. But never losing that, like you are trying to get yourself as quick as you can to the finish line. And that incorporates tactics, but also a lot of the stuff we control in endurance race is fueling, mindset, taking your lines, not getting lost, that sort of stuff. The other one that comes up a lot in some of these, not a lot, but that comes up in some endurance races, but races in general, is this like neutral start. This is related to like group rides should be easy. This is just a group ride. It shouldn't be like a race. Well, most group rides are races. So go in with that expectation.
I would argue most group rides are somehow harder than races.
Right. For sure, because a lot of people who go to group rides, that is their racing. That's their 2 hours they get to go away from home, on a Saturday morning. They're not having to go to work, and they've been pent up all week, and they are sending it.
Not to mention you have to act casual the whole time too. So it's a really odd, like, trying to catch your breath while having a conversation.
So if you go in activated in that this is going to be very hard. People are really into this, and like I'm here, and maybe I don't really care that much about it, but I'm going to ride in this. This is my intention. I'm going to get a good workout, but I am assuming this is going to be quite challenging. Then you've framed things and your expectation is such that you're now preparing for that effort. And when it's really hard, your brain isn't going, this wasn't supposed to be this hard, right? And then you probably persist a little longer. So you can see how that expectations reality is important. Now, similarly, the one in the races is, I see this all the time, well, neutral start. I remember I was in Green Mountain Stage Race, was like one of the first road neutrals, and I was remember, okay, good, at least this stage, because there had been two before and they were pretty hard. Okay, at least this one will ease into the first 20K.
Absolutely not.
And meanwhile, it's a car going 20 kilometers an hour or something up a hill, so it's quite vigorous. And everyone's jostling to try and get into the right place, and eventually the car's going to accelerate. So a lot of times it's neutral in that you're following a car, I guess, and you can't go around the car, but the car tends to go, or whatever, the ATV, whatever the thing you're following, isn't going super slow. And again, it's all relative. Like the people at the front who are the race winners might be not working that hard, but it's sort of chaos behind. And for a lot of people, as with the surges and just the hecticness, it ends up being, so I would just assume it is a race and we're just following a car to start. So that's when you hear neutral, it means you're following something.
This does not mean like be a dick about it. Like, don't be a jerk in the neutral start and like try to race people, but like be prepared for the fact that it's going to be hard. Is really
just
what
the
we're
expectation. Like, don't go into a neutral start thinking this is going to be like such a casual, like chatty coffee ride. Maybe we'll stop periodically. That just don't, like, it's a different expectation. So again, this is some of these things where we go into them, and we talked about the other one of in a gravel endurance race. Often off-road races are particularly like this. So if you're coming from road, you might think, oh, we'll all ride together till we sprint at the end. No, most off-road races that are endurance races do end up sprint, like just because of the technical nature and the climbing. It's very rare that you end up with people for a lot of the race. No, it certainly happens and is great when you get into like a nice group of 2 or 3, but that group of 2 or 3 may change throughout the race. You might be a group of 20 and then 2 and then 1 and then, oh, I caught them back at the aid station and then they didn't stop at the next one. And then this was technical and I got away and I caught another group. And so this is your adventure and there'll be different characters throughout the whole thing, right? But that's the expectation. It's not, oh, I'm going to just draft people for 100 miles of gravel. That's not how that works, right?
Yeah, love it.
So the expectations are such a huge lead in to keeping the focus, keeping the mindset, keeping the effort all the way to that finish line. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we're actually going to wrap up there and we're going to hit on heat next week because we are pretty tight on time here, or we're like over time. So
that's
definitely,
a teaser.
Yeah, if you were excited about heat, tune in next week. And definitely head over to Consummate Athlete on Instagram, consummateathlete.com. If you have any questions, comments, if you have any specific heat questions, maybe hit us with those. I actually just talked to a researcher on heat adaptation for an article for bicycling. So I have
if anyone has like a scenario they've went through that we can use and sort of work through, and sometimes it's nice to have specific situations.
Cool. All right. With that, we will leave you with have a great week of training and we will see you next Tuesday. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.